In the previous discussion, we explored the fabric of existence, reaching beyond all that we have known or formally recognized so far. Here, we journey deeper into its nature, toward the subtle transformations that unfold as part of its natural course. This fabric does not remain frozen in a single state. While the timing and form of change may not be deterministic, the presence of change itself is unavoidable. What we perceive as stability often emerges from deeper processes that are quietly in motion. To understand these transitions, we must begin where the fabric reveals itself most tangibly, in the properties of the vacuum itself. The vacuum is not merely the backdrop of existence, but an active medium whose characteristics shape how fields, forces, and energy behave across the universe. In this exploration, we reflect on how subtle variations in this medium ripple through the fabric, what we perceive as their causes, how they manifest physically, and how all structures embedded within the fabric, including ourselves, adapt to these shifts. Come, let us step further into the unfolding weave of existence, beginning with the question of whether even the vacuum's most fundamental properties are truly immutable. So far, we have treated vacuum permeability and vacuum permittivity as universal constants, fixed quantities that define how the vacuum responds to electric and magnetic fields. But are they truly constant everywhere in the universe? The answer is both yes and no. In the classical sense, these quantities are indeed constants. When measured under standard conditions, they yield the same values and form the basis of Maxwell's equations. However, when viewed through the lens of quantum physics, the situation becomes more nuanced. The vacuum is not a simple, featureless void, and its electromagnetic properties cannot be measured identically in all regions of the universe. Certain cosmic factors can influence how the vacuum behaves, making its effective permeability and permittivity appear slightly different from place to place. These factors are intrinsic to the fabric of the vacuum itself. They include the local electromagnetic field strength, the energy scale of the region, and the space-time curvature caused by gravity. In effect, they are inseparable from the nature of the vacuum in that locale. Their presence subtly alters the quantum behavior of the vacuum, leading to small but meaningful variations in its electromagnetic properties. From the perspective of quantum electrodynamics, QED, the vacuum behaves much like a dielectric medium filled with fleeting virtual particles, mainly electron-positron pairs, that continuously emerge and vanish. These fluctuations define the electromagnetic texture of space and give rise to the observable values of vacuum permeability and permittivity that we recognize in conventional physics. However, this dynamic sea of virtual particles is sensitive to its surroundings. When a region of space experiences a strong electromagnetic field, the polarization behavior of the vacuum changes. The virtual pairs interact differently with the field, slightly modifying how the vacuum responds to electric and magnetic influences. Under ordinary interstellar conditions, where fields are weak, this effect is negligible. But in the vicinity of extremely strong magnetic fields, such as those near magnetars, the difference becomes significant. The vacuum can even behave as a birefringent medium, splitting electromagnetic waves into distinct polarization planes. Under the most extreme conditions, QED predicts nonlinear effects, where the vacuum's electromagnetic response no longer scales linearly with the applied field. In summary, regions exposed to sufficiently intense magnetic fields will exhibit altered effective values of vacuum permeability and permittivity. When such regions also experience strong gravitational curvature, both effects combine, further modifying how the vacuum behaves. So while vacuum permeability and permittivity are treated as constants within classical physics, in reality they are effective constants, values that can vary subtly across different regions of the universe depending on the local quantum and gravitational conditions. Now, let's turn to a realistic question. If the permeability and permittivity of space in some distant corner of the universe differ slightly from their usual values, why should that matter to us? A fair question. After all, such variations would only become relevant if they occurred around us. Only then could they potentially affect us, right? Yes, that reasoning is sound. However, there's a deeper layer to consider. The vacuum permittivity and permeability can in fact change for us. Not because the universe shifts around a static observer, but because we ourselves are in motion. We are part of a continuously moving celestial system. Our planet Earth rotates on its own axis and orbits the Sun. The Sun, along with the entire solar system, moves within the Milky Way galaxy. Meanwhile, countless other cosmic bodies move in and out of gravitational and electromagnetic influence across this journey. Even the Milky Way itself travels along a defined path through the greater cosmic expanse. Together, these layered motions create a complex trajectory through space-time, constantly altering our relative position with respect to nearby and distant celestial bodies. As a result, the local vacuum characteristics, its permeability and permittivity, may subtly fluctuate due to changing proximity and influence of surrounding cosmic environments. Traditionally, such variations are assumed to have negligible impact. That may well be true in terms of percentage change. The numbers might seem minuscule. Yet we cannot be certain how even such minute changes might affect the dynamics of our existence, or whether it is justified to keep disregarding them. The purpose here is not to judge what is negligible and what is significant, but rather to explore whether these changes occur at all, and if they do, what implications they might hold. Irrespective of whether they are negligible or not, the intent here is to recognize those implications and give them their fair share of thought. In essence, as the celestial systems that cradle our existence traverse the vast fabric of space-time, the vacuum's intrinsic properties may shift subtly in response to the evolving cosmic environment. Next, let us explore how such variations could influence the energy constructs that define and sustain us. Now let's take a closer look at what happens when the vacuum permittivity and vacuum permeability begin to change. Since the speed of light in vacuum is a constant, nature must preserve that balance. This means that if the vacuum permittivity increases, the vacuum permeability must decrease in proportion and vice versa so that the value of light speed remains unchanged. This delicate equilibrium between the two constants is what keeps the electromagnetic structure of the universe stable and self-consistent. Once that is understood, the next step is to see how these variations influence other universal constants, particularly those that define the behavior of energy rather than matter. Because our concern here is not about how atoms or particles themselves change, but how the underlying energy framework of the universe responds when the vacuum's electromagnetic nature shifts. Two constants, in particular, are directly affected by any such change: the fine structure constant and the vacuum impedance. Both are deeply rooted in the electromagnetic properties of space itself, and both depend on the vacuum's permittivity and permeability. The fine structure constant is a measure of how strongly energy interacts through electromagnetic forces. It describes the strength of electromagnetic coupling. When the vacuum's permittivity increases, the fine structure constant decreases, which means the electromagnetic interactions become weaker. The universe in that state behaves more like a quantum fluid, less rigid, more uncertain, and more delocalized in its energy behavior. On the other hand, when the permittivity decreases, the fine structure constant grows stronger. The electromagnetic coupling becomes tighter, and the universe behaves in a more localized, classically stable way, what we may call a quantum stiff state. The other key quantity is the vacuum impedance, which represents how easily electromagnetic waves can travel through the vacuum. When the permeability rises and the permittivity falls, the impedance of the vacuum increases, meaning the vacuum offers more resistance to the propagation of electromagnetic energy. Conversely, when the permeability decreases and the permittivity increases, the impedance becomes smaller, and the vacuum allows electromagnetic energy to move and interact more freely. This has an important consequence. For any system, whether atomic, molecular, or even astrophysical, to absorb electromagnetic energy effectively, it must resonate with the medium around it. If the vacuum impedance changes, the resonance condition also changes. As a result, the way energy is absorbed, transmitted, or exchanged across systems would subtly alter. Taken together, these effects show how even the slightest variation in vacuum permittivity and permeability, while keeping the speed of light constant, could ripple through the very architecture of energy in the universe. The fine structure constant would determine how strongly energy interacts. The vacuum impedance would decide how smoothly it propagates. Together, they would define how energy flows, couples, and stabilizes across the cosmic field. In essence, if the electromagnetic character of the vacuum were to shift even slightly, the entire balance of energy interactions in the universe would adapt in response. The rhythm of energy exchange, the degree of quantum uncertainty, and the resonance between radiation and matter would all evolve together to preserve the greater harmony of the cosmic energy construct. So what would happen if we were to transition into a state of the universe where the vacuum permittivity has increased? We would begin to notice some subtle effects. We might realize that the strength of our thoughts and commitments, the brainwave patterns that once reinforced our ways of thinking and living, now seem to carry less potency, or we can say that those have become somewhat fluid than before. It would feel as though our thoughts no longer imprint themselves upon the mind with the same depth or persistence as before. We would find ourselves revisiting those thoughts more frequently, as if to reaffirm our commitments, because their impressions fade faster than they once did. This occurs because brain waves, or ELF, extremely low frequency waves, are now less strongly coupled in the altered medium. The increase in vacuum permittivity reduces the electromagnetic coupling and consequently the fine structure constant, weakening the overall interaction strength of electromagnetic energy. For the same reason, we would also observe a degradation in thinking coherence. Groups of people who earlier could easily align their thoughts and intentions toward a shared goal would now find it harder to achieve that collective resonance. The degree of decoherence would rise, and with it, the uncertainty in human decisions and actions. Would this lead to a world that feels a little more chaotic and uncertain than before? Perhaps so. The previously balanced resistance to polarization within the vacuum had offered a natural determinism and structure. A slight increase in vacuum permittivity may be enough to perturb that situation towards a new normal. If you wish to understand these phenomena, how brainwave emissions, thought coherence, and energy interactions work, explore the earlier content available on this channel within the playlist Self-Actualization for Seekers. In particular, the episodes titled What and How We Radiate from Our Energy Self, When Your Energy Self Talks to My Energy Self, and How Do We Think will provide foundational context. Additionally, related discussions in the same playlist, such as Why Death is Not the End, There is a Heaven Out There, and Why the Heaven is a Heaven, reveal that after the physical body ceases, the energy self continues as a beamform of elf energy, residing within the Earth's ionospheric cavity until it is reabsorbed once again. An increase in vacuum permittivity and a reduction in the fine structure constant would influence this as well. The beamform coupling would diminish slightly, as reduced electromagnetic coupling weakens the energy field's quantum stiffness. So far, we've considered the case where vacuum permittivity increases, but what if it decreases instead? In that case, the electromagnetic coupling would strengthen, and matter-energy interactions would become somewhat more deterministic in a quantum sense. Human brain waves would persist with greater imprints and quantum certainties, allowing thoughts and commitments to reinforce themselves more strongly within the mind. Collective thinking coherence would also improve. Groups would more easily synchronize their intentions and achieve alignment. This would also lead to a world that feels a little less chaotic and more certain than before in the quantum fabric. Beyond the physical body, the ELF beamform of the energy self would manifest a stronger presence, sustained by the heightened electromagnetic coupling of the surrounding medium, projecting its characteristics and influence with greater clarity and power. Now, let us consider what happens when the vacuum impedance increases. This change directly affects all phenomena that rely on achieving resonance in order for the human body to receive an ELF, extremely low frequency beamform. Under normal conditions, the human body functions much like a receiver in the science of RF communication or antenna design. To receive an ELF wave pattern effectively, it must establish resonance with the incoming signal, a process that depends on the matching of impedance between the medium and the receiving body. While the human body has a certain degree of adaptability in tuning its impedance, this adaptability has limits. If the impedance of the surrounding medium varies beyond that range, the body can no longer achieve full resonance. Consequently, the complete power of the ELF wave cannot be transferred to the receiver. The degree of energy transfer then determines how effectively the ELF communication process succeeds for that individual. The situation becomes even more intricate when this phenomenon is viewed in the context of birth. The birth process already involves layers of physical and energetic complexity. As the embryo matures within the mother's womb, it gradually develops both a physical structure and an energetic form, becoming a suitable host for absorbing ELF beamforms. The mother's own energy receiving capacity also plays a vital role in determining how seamlessly this absorption can occur. When the medium's impedance itself is changed, an additional layer of complexity is introduced. Without proper resonance, only a portion of the ELF beamform energy is absorbed, while the rest is reflected and remains unassimilated. Depending on the proportion of absorption and reflection, this can result in either a successful birth, though with a reduced intensity of the energy self, or an unsuccessful birth due to insufficient energy transfer or improper absorption. In essence, even a subtle change in the characteristics of the vacuum can ripple through various dimensions of our existence, influencing processes both physical and metaphysical, and in some cases, leaving lasting repercussions on the continuity and quality of life itself. In the previous discussion, we came to recognize the true essence of the vacuum, the all-pervading medium that forms, surrounds, and sustains us. We are made of it, immersed in it, and dependent upon it for our very existence. This medium, the vacuum, is not an empty void, but the foundation of certainty, continuity, and existence itself. Within its subtle fabric lies the framework upon which reality is woven. And this fabric is supreme, transcending all measures of recognition or comprehension. That is its essence. In this exploration, we considered the possibility that even slight variations within this supreme fabric could influence who we are, our nature, our characteristics, and the sense of normalcy that defines our experience. The behavioral patterns of life, and indeed the rhythm of existence itself, could shift in response to even minute changes in this underlying fabric. That change, or the very possibility of it, may represent another supreme presence, one that complements the structure of existence and imparts to it a dynamic behavior. Together, structure and behavior form what we call the fabric of existence. We exist as long as this fabric remains within our range of adaptability. We cease to exist when it moves beyond it. And this we is not limited to humanity alone. This principle extends across the boundless continuum of creation, embracing galaxies, stars, planets, molecules, and atoms alike. The state of existence, or the absence of it, applies to all equally. What name would you give to such a presence? That choice we leave to you. But one truth remains undeniable. It deserves our reverence, our gratitude, and our deepest bow, a humble surrender to the supreme fabric of existence, with which we are forever and inseparably intertwined. If you've been following along through the earlier sessions, you might be asking yourself, is this where the journey ends? The truth is, both yes and no. We've laid a strong foundation, yet there's always more to uncover for those willing to go further. With that, let's explore the idea of collaborative will, and if the moment calls for it, we'll return to carry the conversation forward.